about, Zulu, or anything that you want to start with?
Well, I suppose it's been a while since we talked, so I suppose we could
Yeah.
kind of restate our positions. I suppose probably the most relevant to you guys would be I am definitely an anti-socialist, anti-communist, all that type of thing. I'm an anarcho-capitalist, so I mean, there's probably plenty to talk about right there.
Mm.
Break down the video that we were just talking about, right? What was it, Mike?
Why socialism is impossible. I mean, it was probably a pretty older video, right? I'd be surprised if you remember point by point, Zulu, but we were
remember the
watching
basic
about
idea.
the economic calculation problem, and I guess why that makes it a physical impossibility for socialism to work without the price controls over the factors of production.
Yes, so basically the thesis of that video is the economic calculation problem. It is the idea that you can't have a socialist economy because under socialism you can't economize because you don't know which factor of production, like which line of production is going to be best. You can't arrange the factors. So the reason for this is because if you have no private property, no private direction, no private control of factors of production or means of production, whatever you want to call them, then you're not allowed to trade them, of course, because it's going to be a single guy deciding where it all goes, or a group of guys, or whatever it is, single will. So that you're not trading them, which means you can't get prices for the factor of production, which means that you can't perform economic calculation. You can't compare how much it costs to make a widget versus how much you're getting out of it. So without economic calculation, there's nothing you can do.
So when you say socialism, you're not actually counting market socialism.
I mean, what do you mean by market socialism? You know, I hear that term thrown around.
A model that attempts to combine elements of market economies with social ownership.
Well, how specifically does it do that? Am I allowed to go out and own a factory and trade factory goods with different people?
I mean, could you conceive of a system where it is someone's job to keep an inventory of different goods or quantities or whatever it is these factors are, and then assign, I guess, some kind of rarity to them that would be similar to a price, but it's not actually like a price. It's for internal use only. The same that like a business would do some kind of like internal calculations that way, but then it's because it's a socialist run economy. You have something similar to a price control, but it's just not used for trading. It's more used for keeping track of the inventory.
Well, the problem is that just assigning some arbitrary rarity value, and it might not even be arbitrary, you know, maybe if we just restrict ourselves for now to like actual goods which have a mass, let's say we use the mass, and we use, okay, there are, you know, 62 tons of copper and 65 tons of steel and all that stuff. Well, that doesn't actually give you the information you need because you need to know whether or not which one is the most efficient in this line of production. You know, maybe you've got a bunch of copper lying around and you could be using it to make cars out of, but you don't know if that's actually the most value productive use of copper. Copper might be better spent elsewhere, and just knowing how rare copper is, how many tons of it you've got, that doesn't tell you that. And this problem, of course, even gets worse when you realize that, well, not everything can be measured in tons, right? You might have manpower, how many hours of engineer time you've got. Clearly you're not measuring that in tons. So how are you going to compare these things and figure out how much engineering you should use, how much all sorts of different stuff should you use, right?
Yeah, I guess I just don't understand why that can't be done by people who have a job under socialism and are paid or whatever, or even if they're just not even paid because money is not a factor anymore. You have like services provided to you by the government. I guess I just don't understand why the price has to be the magic solution there to get people to do these things, as opposed to keeping track of the man hours used to produce something the same way you were keeping track of an amount of it that you have on hand. And I guess more importantly, when we were watching your video, I thought it was really ironic that you used the example of building railroads. And I wanted to ask you specifically, like, how do you explain the like Communist Party of China building a high-speed rail over their entire country while the U.S. can't do it in California, with Elon Musk, like the private capitalist dude, championing the project?
Well, I don't think that's a good way to spend resources, is my point. And China doesn't know whether it's a good way to spend resources because they can't do economic calculation. They can't compare how much they're putting into something as against how much profit they're getting out. They just can't
Well,
do that calculation.
do you think everything has a monetary, metric to it? I mean, some things.
Well, it should, is the point.
The well-being of people, or how much a tree costs.
I mean, I don't know. Try and measure well-being however you want. It doesn't really matter.
I guess,
it doesn't resolve this problem.
Does it have a value? And is China? Do you consider China socialist?
Well, it's certainly somewhat socialist. It's got some amount of free trade, though. But
you would
massive government
consider the U.S.
interference.
a socialist too, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that China is failing, or are they succeeding in the particular model that they have?
Failing.
How?
Really?
Yes.
Number one GDP, PPP.
Well, this is the thing that economists always say: failing as against what, right? Compared to what? Compared to dirt farmers out in the middle of nowhere. Sure, there's more wealth in China, but the point is that wealth is being destroyed by the government. It's being mismanaged, and it has to be because you can't perform economic calculation to whatever degree you have socialism. You have a single will directing the factors of production.
So what metric gauges whether or not a country is strong?
I didn't bring up strength.
Strength, or I mean, what?
I guess okay.
So let's get into this abstract debate on whether or not what's good is good, or it's bad, good, or.
Well, no. I want to ask him, let's say because I don't hold this position anymore. But let's say I'm like a champagne socialist here in the U.S. and I come to somebody like Liquid Zulu and I say, look, I just want free healthcare and college in the U.S. and some public transportation, or just those same things from the private market, but at a reasonable cost, because right now they're unaffordable to me as somebody who's like a blue-haired dog walker, socialist leftist person in the US, right? And so I ask Liquid Zulu, when is the capitalist free market going to deliver those things? Like, how much more does the US have to deregulate industries? How many more Uber apps and other things do we have to get before I can afford healthcare, college, and transportation, and housing at a reasonable cost, considering that all of those costs of things keep going up. And then I use China as an example of a society that's giving those things to their people at reasonable cost and to everyone across the board. And then your answer is basically I shouldn't want those things because it's actually bad that China is doing that because the people are going to be worse off.
I don't know how familiar you are with China, but a lot of those youth are not feeling like they're getting things at reasonable costs and that they're getting jobs falling from the ceiling. There's a huge problem with that in China at the moment. But the point stands that really it doesn't. First of all, I don't think it matters whether the blue-haired socialist is getting things at what they consider a reasonable cost, right? I don't care about that. But at a reasonable cost, if you want to talk about healthcare at a reasonable cost, let's go back before the U.S. government got involved, before the APA was a thing. It was $2.
It was so far back.
Hold on.
That's kind of my thing.
There's
no hope for these things in the West.
It was $2 a year. $2.
Yeah, if you have to go back that far, you kind of have lost your position.
No, I haven't.
You're admitting that socialism is kicking the ass out of the West.
No. Hold on. You're asking me, okay, well, when will capitalism deliver these things? Well, capitalism already delivered these things, and then socialism came in and destroyed it.
Not anymore.
$2 a year. That was the average day's wage for a laborer. Right?
No, I think
and then you could have healthcare for the entire year.
You can't describe a situation in which capitalism will ever do this again for people in the West. I think that's
why would it not do it again? Hold on. If it did it before, why couldn't it do it again?
Because that was unsustainable. It was built on genocide, land theft, and slavery.
Okay, explain to me how the U.S. lodge system, which is the basis of this healthcare I'm discussing, explain to me how it was based on genocide, wage slavery, and
U.S. what system?
Land lodge system. Whatever the three things you listed, explain to me how it's based on genocide. Let's just stick to that one.
I guess what is the lodge system?
So the lodge system, it's they used to have these fraternal societies in the U.S. This was before the welfare state. So you'd pay a small annual fee to be part of one of these societies, and basically, if you got your house burning, it was like just a general insurance type of thing. So the lodge system specifically, was that these fraternal societies would have a doctor on retainer. And their members would be able to pay in a small yearly fee to be able to use that doctor's services as and when they required them. And that cost $2 for a year. And of course, these establishment doctors, they didn't like that very much. They didn't like selling their services for so cheap. So what they did is they formed the APA, and they started requiring licensing and all this other sort of stuff. and they shut down the lodge system, and that's when the welfare state comes in, and it's a whole lot worse.
Okay, but so from what years did this exist?
This is what he's talking about. This in the 16th century, they had these things. Well, they had harsh conditions in workhouses. They were stigmatizing the poor.
Not 16th century.
Yeah.
I mean, there might have been a lodge system in 16th century, but I'm talking about the US.
The poor laws were a system of poor relief that existed from the 16th to the early 20th century. Harsh conditions. What you're describing went away on purpose.
Any kind of system can exist and supposedly give people better results than what is currently existing if you only take selective examples of like successes under that system, and then
that's what you asked me, though. You asked me.
I'm trying to answer.
When could capitalism bring this about? I answered it already did bring about, and then it was destroyed by socialism.
Well, yeah,
and then your point was, well, it couldn't do that again. So why couldn't it do it again? And your answer was that it's unsustainable because it was based on genocide. So I want you to explain to me how the lodge system is based on genocide.
Because it could exist in a system that was expanding with like, vast amounts of free real estate and slave labor that it could build everything on. Like, you don't get to be in the lodge system unless you're part of the privileged class. Explain to me how the lodge
system, which was for the working poor, by the way, explain to me how this system requires slave labor.
Because that's what everything was built on up until a certain point.
So you think it's impossible to have a lodge system without slave labor?
No, I think that you have to reference something that existed during that time. What are you talking about?
Is it possible to have a lodge system without slave labor?
I mean, I wouldn't even know. I don't understand enough about the lodge system to think that it matters. Like, it just doesn't. You're pointing to a system that existed in a previous time and could work at a small scale when a country was like still relying on a bunch of free labor. And so you can point to that system working under those conditions because it did. And so it doesn't matter. Like, I'm asking, why doesn't somebody bring back the lodge system now and then make it better than the current state-run thing to replace it?
Because the welfare state has crowded it out. It's impossible to start up a lodge system these days. The government would shut you down. It'd be like, hey, you're using unlicensed doctors here, not allowed to do that. You got to be FDA approved. Okay, we'll get FDA approved. Oh, sorry, your insurance thing, it's got to cover pre-existing conditions. So you've got to cover, if somebody's house is burning down. Hold on. So pre-existing conditions, the problem with that is that if my house is burning down, it's currently on fire, then I go, hey, I want to get some fire insurance out of my currently burning down house, and I'll just make an instant profit, right? That's the problem with covering pre-existing conditions. You have to do that in the US if you want to have any sort of insurance thing. The government has completely destroyed any possibility of making something like this. So
the lodge system requires people having the forethought to buy a type of insurance or lodge system for all aspects of it for it to work.
That's the same with all insurance. You can't insure something that is already happening.
Yeah, well, so you might as well just have it run by the state and have one.
Why might as well have it run by the state?
I mean, things like fire don't necessarily care about who buys insurance and who doesn't. The fire can go from an insured person's house over to an uninsured person. This is why the system went away, is because it doesn't work.
It works perfectly fine. What are you talking about?
It's not being tried anywhere in the world. There's at least socialist countries. So what you're advocating for has never existed in the history of human history.
Hold on.
Human history has anyone ever fucking done a whole fully unregulated laissez-faire capitalism, Milton Friedman wet dream,
let me respond.
Mises fucking circle jerk. It's never happened. Never will, because it's not feasible. You can't do this. And you can point. You can use academic jargon to run your mouth.
Just 3 seconds.
And talk about historical context and everything like this. But let me tell you something. You are missing large parts of your theory. It's full of holes. It's worse than Swiss cheese. How do you explain fire? How do you explain police? How do you do national defense?
Hold on.
How do you?
I'm explaining to you how you do these things. Okay. So you can't do this thing of, oh, well, where is capitalism working? Oh, it's not working anywhere because we destroyed it everywhere. See, it doesn't work, right? That's a catch-22. I can't, hold on.
Okay.
And I can explain to you how these things are done under capitalism if you want, right? And it's not going to be by pointing to socialists, how socialists do it, right? Because clearly that's not going to be how it's done. So for literally anything, literally any of the industries you've mentioned, I don't face the economic calculation problem. For all of them, you do, right? That's the fundamental point. And if
And
you can,
somehow a socialist country is eating your lunch with 70% of
eating
the
my
people
lunch, indeed,
who
yes,
are-
it is.
They're cheaper food, cheaper rent, 90%
Paid for by me
homeownership
because it's my
rate.
lunch.
No, it's not your lunch.
You said it was my lunch.
It's market socialism. You're buying goods.
You said they're eating my lunch.
He means
Completely.
eating your lunch as in, like,
Indeed.
as in
It's
Chinese
a-
socialism is coming for the West, not like literally sucking off your tax dollars.
I
'cause
agree.
they're
They
not-
are coming for the West. Yes, the socialists love to predate on people. I completely
And they're
agree with that.
manufacturing circles around you. They got the largest GDP, purchase parity power, which is a better metric than the American economy has just devolved
And-
into not producing anything. GE is moving money around instead of actually innovating because it costs too much to actually innovate, and they can't take a risk on the shareholders. The shareholders won't have a CEO go in there and risk money when they could just invest it and make sure that everybody's getting paid dividends.
So just
What happened to the capitalist dream that you're talking
One question.
about?
Let him
doesn't
respond,
work.
Chris. Here.
one question. How, under socialism, do you resolve the economic calculation problem?
You can keep bringing up the fucking economic calculation
hold on.
problem.
I
It
had
doesn't
something for
matter,
this.
bro, because they are beating you.
But how do you resolve it?
Let me,
You by introducing a little bit of capitalism into the system.
Okay, so you
By
need
allowing,
my system
by
to fix your
allowing
system.
some market dynamics to take hold and be able to guide the market where it needs to go.
So you do
So that people can bid on contracts
So,
and people
hold
can work in a competitive environment so that you have that sort of incentive to work coupled with, you know,
So you agree then that the way to resolve the economic calculation problem is by having capitalism. So then
but
why?
not
so then,
anarcho-capitalism, not
hold on, I'm about to
laissez-faire
ask.
Milton Friedman
So then,
bullshit.
why not complete capitalism?
Why not?
because it provably doesn't work. Like, this is the whole thing that I find frustrating, but also kind of
I don't
amusing.
say,
is that-
look,
Well,
I'll
hold
give,
on.
I don't say it doesn't work. That's the thing. I don't say it doesn't work. It just needs to be fucking heavily monitored because it's like,
Yeah, I mean, I said this before when I talked to Liquid Zulu before, like 2 years ago, is that like they're in the position of being like everything is not real capitalism, and it's literally the position that we were in as socialists in the 90s when it looked like socialism was a joke of an ideology and was never going to work again, until like the rise of the existing socialist countries and like the BRICS alliance and anti-imperialists now. But that has put the quote unquote capitalists in the opposite position, where they say everything that was like, or currently is failing capitalism is because of government interference, because there always is a government. There is no like free market that exists. There is no country without a government. There's no anarcho-capistan. It can't exist. It's like it's a fiction, but it works very well for internet sophists for whom this is all like academic and theoretical, and it's just like a fun thing to talk about.
So you
I
said,
think this
so
is a
hold on,
pretty
hold on,
stupid
hold on.
argument.
Let me
First of all,
respond.
no, let me just say, look,
Let me respond.
First of all,
Let
it's a
me- you don't
stupid
let me respond.
argument because you're conflating socialism and capitalism as if either one of these are 100% in any country.
Who's
Chris, he's not gonna come
conflating
back
socialism
for
and
me.
capitalism? Okay, so you said the reason why not total capitalism is that it provably doesn't work. In what way does it provably not work? Can you give me the
Declining
proof?
social metrics and environmental collapse.
Capitalism with regulation can work. Capitalism without regulation won't work. It will lead to chaos. It will lead to the destruction of everything.
But I want to hear what he says to my declining social metrics and environmental collapse response.
Yes.
Like,
So declining social metrics, how are we establishing? So first of all, which social metrics?
things like literacy, life expectancy,
IQ,
happiness.
IQ, upward mobility,
Let's see,
housing.
status, health, healthcare. What do you call it? Results as opposed to cost. Infant maternal
We could take
mortality.
that stuff for now. So how are you establishing? Like, let's just take like literacy as one.
Mhm.
How do you establish that capitalism necessarily causes declining declining literacy?
Because I look at countries that have like socialist governments like Cuba, China, Laos, DPRK, Vietnam, and they have like high literacy rates compared to capitalist countries that have laissez-faire governments or other styles of governments, because it's not profitable. It's not profitable to teach people to read.
Okay, so it's not.
There's a lot of reasons because of that. It's also because you live in a consumerist culture that doesn't actually actively push people to read. They push them to do whatever sells, which is addictive styles of consumables like sugars and social media and whatever, you know.
Okay, so
Chris is also not a socialist, by the way. He's like an anarcho something or other, but he's a leftist kind of anarcho something.
I'm something or other.
So if it doesn't pay to have people who are literate, right? To have literacy, I'll just note that down. Which person do you think is more likely to succeed on the market? The person who's dumb as a stump, or the person who's a complete genius? And
it pays to have people be literate enough to do your jobs and to run your machines or to participate in like the barest of like, I don't know, economic performance or whatever, but it doesn't pay to have people that are like well-read and really educated.
Why not?
So yeah, and because then they could start to question their class position.
Okay, so you're conflating literacy with being a communist.
No, not necessarily, but it is. They do tend to go hand in hand. Even anti-communists have said that like literacy was one of the first things that the communists went after. And
universities are a fucking hotbed of communism. Well, this is where all these movements start.
You're reversing cause and effect here, right?
I mean, conservative views are also linked to lower cognitive ability too.
That's been proven too.
I want you to establish then that as someone becomes more literate, as they become more intelligent, they per se become a communist. Or even if they just tend to become a communist.
Here, hold on. I got some studies I'll pull up.
They do. They actually have proven it through scientific studies and found that there's lower cognitive.
Give me 1 second. Sorry.
He's looking it up. The other thing is income inequality is going to exacerbate illiteracy. And of course, that's what happens in a capitalist society without any regulation. More and more money gets funneled to the top, and that money is then used to find ways to make more money.
And so would your solution, hold on. Would your solution to all that money getting funneled to the top, would your solution to that be have one guy at the top who controls where all the money goes? And you think that would be suitable?
That's a silly representation of socialism that like 5-year-olds would use. Like,
no, an absolute cap.
And yet it's what the socialists keep doing.
Yeah, well, not really, though. I mean, they have like actual parties that meet and they discuss things at the local level, and then funnels up to the higher level up until they're able to like.
So
yeah,
funnels up. Okay.
I mean, they're actually able to like have. Hold on 1 second. Like you have countries like Cuba that can write their constitution democratically, where every person participates and then ratifies all the amendments.
And so it funnels up from that local level, and it keeps funneling up into the upper levels, into this one guy on top.
Right.
And that's a 5-year-old's representation of communism, I thought.
No, who then has to satisfy all those people underneath, or else he doesn't get to stay in that position. It's not that complicated. But if people want to misrepresent it because of their agenda to, then it may sound different, right?
Conservative views are
linked to lower. Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
The subsequent deregulation of all these industries since the birth of Milton Friedman in the 80s with Thatcherism and everything has led to nothing but disaster and poverty and increasing homelessness, increasing poverty, increasing welfare spending without actually curing anything. And now in recent years, increase in crime. It's the 50s when we taxed billionaires at 90%. We had everything we needed, and we could buy a house on a year's salary and not go into a mortgage to get a new car. So there's that.
Okay, so the paper you've got here, just based on the title, doesn't establish what you were trying to establish here. It establishes that lower cognitive. Hold on. Let me say, right? This paper is supposed to establish that lower cognitive ability predicts greater prejudice, right? That was not the claim that I was making. The claim I was making.
I was saying that conservative views are linked to lower cognitive ability, and I have a couple other papers here. I'm still going to put in the link.
The claim you have to evidence is that as people become more literate, they become more communist.
You don't need to go down this one narrow hole and then beat it to death. We could talk about lots of different metrics and data.
But so what you're relying on there is that communism is correct, and as people become more intelligent, they will recognize the truth more. But I don't see how communism is correct.
It's more that socialism is like the next stage of development for humanity beyond capitalism. And unfortunately, there's a lot of capitalists who have a lot of power and prevent people from realizing that, from coming to very obvious conclusions about that, and therefore keep them stuck in previous or like outmoded levels of development. And then you can see that that's the case by the declining social metrics and the increased instability of that system and the environmental consequences.
So I want to dig into this a little bit, where you say that socialism is the next stage of humanity. What do you mean by a stage of humanity?
Like it goes in stages, but it doesn't have to go sequentially. Like you can go back and forth because it's not like, what do you call it, linear. It's not predetermined. You can have elements of each one still left over in the next, just like there's elements of feudalism left over in capitalism. There are elements of capitalism left over in developing socialist societies and lots of contradictions there. But yeah, that's how it works. And you can, of course, regress, like I was saying.
Okay, so the way it's going through these stages, is this based on the dialectic process then? Because you brought up contradictions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's dig into dialectics a little bit then.
Yeah, I know you don't like dialectics, like they're outlawed in your server, right?
just as a meme. So dialectics. So is your claim then that the contradiction is the really true thing, and that if you have the proposition and its negation, then you get the new proposition out of it? The thesis, antithesis, yada yada yada.
If I think I'm understanding your terms correctly, let me just explain it using my terms and see if it jives with what you just said. Because basically, most people think that it's like synthesis or like thesis and an antithesis, and then they arrive together at a synthesis, and then it's like done. But really, that new synthesis is just another thing that is like a thesis, and then you can have another antithesis, and it just keeps going on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then this is pure Hegel, right?
No, because I thought the whole thing about Marx was that he did the opposite of Hegel, where Hegel is like saying that it's ideas that drive everything, but Marx is saying it's actually the material conditions that drive people to either discover or not those ideas.
I agree it's dialectical materialism, but it's the basic idea is Hegelian, right?
Sure.
Right, okay. So this strikes surely anybody as a fantastical position, that from a proposition, you necessarily get its negation. I want you to explain how you get the negation of a proposition from that proposition. Like, let's just take existence exists.
I'm not a philosophy guy. Like, this is
such a circle jerk, man.
This is the philosophy you're based on, though, right?
Okay, but I don't talk about things in philosophical terms. Like, it would seem to me like that sounds like inertia, like an equal opposite reaction, or like it's like if you push something, if you
and
do
it doesn't
something
sound like inertia, right? Because from each proposition, you get its negation.
I guess just like get to the end of your Socratic like little game you're playing, and then tell me where you're going with it.
Well, where I'm going with it is that this is fantastical. The idea that you can get the negation of a proposition out of a proposition. The proposition is what it is. It isn't what it isn't, right? This is basic logic. So if you're going to use the laws of logic on me, right, then you've got to stick to the laws of logic.
But I don't. He's
just trying to confuse you, Mike. He's just
it's not trying to confuse. I'm sure he has like a mathematical point, but I'm just like, what I keep trying to get Liquid Zulu, and sometimes when I was arguing with Praxman too, is like, how do you translate that to reality? Like, so if you say that like 1 + 1 = 2, when is capitalism going to start not killing people, and when is socialism going to start being bad again? Like.
He doesn't have any real actual data to back up what he's saying.
I'm interested.
He can't reconcile any of the real actual important points. Every time I start talking, he's going to start saying, hold on. Because
I'm trying to answer.
He's never going to actually answer any questions about roads, bridges, or transportation networks, or public utilities, or welfare,
because I can't speak.
Social Security, or K-12, or public universities.
Chris does this. Just let him do it.
Public health initiatives.
And he's never going to and he's not going to do this thing. And there we go. Thank you. So I'm interested in this term you bring up. Like, how am I translating this into reality? He's right in theory, wrong in practice. He just cares about theory, right? This is based on the idea that there is some dichotomy, some alternative between theory and practice. But theory is theory about reality. I don't think there is this dichotomy. And I think it's an arbitrary claim to make, to say,
so where's
that,
the
I can be right.
Like, but why aren't the anarcho-capitalist communes overtaking all these failing statist projects? Like, when is that going to come to fruition for you?
So the reason why it's that isn't happening is because most people are horrible. They're evil. They believe in wrong ideas, right? I'm not claiming that you can just have the right idea.
No, human nature
then,
doesn't work with your ideology.
No, I wasn't claiming that. I'm claiming that people are choosing to not go along with it. They are choosing to believe in incorrect things. They could believe in correct things, and immediately the state would crumble, right? But they choose to believe in incorrect things. They're choosing to be Kantians. They're choosing to be Hegelians. They're choosing to be Marxists. They're choosing to follow all these incorrect ideas.
This is an interesting point, actually. So what do you make of just the term, I guess, ideology, the way that, what's his name? Slavoj Žižek talks about it when he does his, is it Perverse Ideology movie, where he's talking about, it's like people don't even notice it. They're so embedded in it. It's like the fish in the water. They don't know what water is. Is that the reason why people choose the wrong things, is because they're brought up in it and they don't know any better?
For the most part, I think there are a great many people who just, they're just inertia. They just go along with the flow, and they don't really think, have a unique thought in their whole lives. And I think that's probably accurate. And that is why what I'm doing is so important, in my view. Because if I can get across the correct philosophy, which is subjectivism with anarcho-capitalism, then we can have all of the things I'm looking for. We can have puppy dogs and rainbows, and all sorts of brilliant stuff will happen.
Oh, man, that's so well thought out. Well, tell me again about how do you do roads and bridges and transportation, since you're so smart.
Well, I'm not an engineer, but I mean, it's pretty clear. You just put the bricks down and you build up the road, and then you put the road on top of it. Right. Like, I mean, what do you want from me?
I think you know what I mean. What we're discussing here is economic systems. Go ahead and tell me what are you going to do under anarcho-capitalism and libertarian economics? How do you maintain roads, bridges, and other transportation? Is it paid for? Do you can only some people use it? The people who pay for it get it? Because that's what you're dancing around. You don't actually admit that under your system, the people who can't pay for education don't get education, and the people who happen to have money,
I won't dance around that.
Have money. Well, the thing is, if we switch to a libertarian economy, there is nothing to stop monopolization. So the monopolies that already exist,
which point do you want me to address?
Will be pushed into overdrive.
You just give me like 12 points here. Which point do you want me to address? Which point do you want me to address?
You're gonna start talking like Gandalf.
Which point do you want me to address? I want you to tell me just one point.
Like narrow it down for him.
Roads, bridges, and transportation.
So let's say there are two cities between each other, A and B, and I know that a lot of people who live in city A, they come to work in city B. And I could make a lot of money if I built a bridge between them. Maybe there's a river and it's really long to go around the river, right? I put down a nice big bridge and I put a toll road on it, and I say, pay up, right? And then you can pay up, and then I get lots of money from it. Alternatively, maybe it's some sort of shopping district, right? People who want from A want to get to C, which is the shopping district, but they wouldn't want to pay for a toll road or anything. So then I work with the shops in the area, and they say, hey, we really want more customers from city A, so we'll pay you to maintain a bridge, which will keep people coming along, right? Those are two ways which an entrepreneur could use to make a bridge between two cities. What else do you want? Maybe planes. Let's discuss planes. Well, there wouldn't be any environmental regulations, nothing of that sort. So you could burn the nastiest gasoline you can find and get those planes up in the air, pump out all this lovely, lovely smoke to keep the global warming going, and you can transport people all over the place. Like, more examples.
So you're just a fucking retard. Okay, I got it. So
also,
you think the environment has infinite resources and we can pollute it and dump chemicals.
I never said it has infinite resources.
This is exactly what you people think. You don't have girlfriends, and you think that the world would be better like this. There's lack of world evidence to what you're saying. Nobody has ever tried it, operated a libertarian road system. Roads have always been for the public good. You're going to cut holes in
so you
shipping.
Think there has never been a private road?
Interstate commerce, the things that you buy are going to be more fucking expensive.
The claim you made,
they have all the fucking truck drivers are going to have to pay the
claim
tolls
you made
to get the road.
Was that there has never been a free market road.
I'll just keep talking. Coordinated challenge. A fully privatized road system would be total nightmare and coordination. This guy loves
hearing himself talk. Jesus Christ.
Construction, maintenance. Privatization of roads could lead to access issues of lower income individuals and communities, but you don't care about that. You're an Ayn Rand objectivist. All you really care about is your fucking self. That's why you should be bludgeoned to death with a fucking large piece of mining equipment.
I mean, so that just kind of feeds into his thing. Like,
there are
all a bunch of like violent psychopaths who just want to like take over things by force. Like, I don't think of it that way. Like, I think of socialism as a very voluntary and participatory system because people like see that state and state authority can manage societal infrastructure far better than privatization can, and they would rather choose to have someone else manage all those things and build them for them, even if there is some kind of level of I guess corruption that goes along with state management, because corruption can also be present in private enterprise. It can also be a lot less transparent. And I think, hold on just real quick, the idea that you could educate people into just choosing full privatization and anarcho-capitalism, it seems just kind of silly to me, because understood it, I think they would still choose to have someone just manage it at the state level, even if there was some kind of level of corruption, because it makes more sense to have like one person check up on several different areas of industry and business, rather than have individual consumers try to do that for every business that they're buying from and make sure they're not being grafted at every level of everything they're doing in every aspect of their lives. It makes much more sense to have people keep track of other people as a job, aka regulators, rather than have just the buyer beware the only principle that governs everything.
So according to this guy,
can I just jump in on that? Can I just jump on
the whole society would collapse.
Absolutely. And that's according to this guy, and it's all crazy. And we need to do something about the roads. And it's this guy. And there we go. Thank you. So you mentioned their corruption. I don't think corruption is actually the main problem present with socialism. I think even if you have like the most angelic, the most brilliant, completely moral people, they could be your new socialist man, right? They could be really, really into this. They could not want any sort of graft or anything like that.
Wait, just real quick, before you make your next point, do you think that it's the character of the people involved rather than the transparency in the system itself?
Well, it depends on what specifically we want to talk about. I think the character of the people involved is a big thing. I think they're evil, right? I do think that. But I think even if you have the most angelic, the most brilliant people, they could all be Albert Einsteins and the greatest moralists you've ever heard of, right? They couldn't want a dime for themselves. They could just really, really want to make this socialist machine work, and everybody could be like this. And still, you have the economic calculation problem. So the problem with that is that you just can't compare input costs as against output profits. You can't do that per comparison because the prices on the input side, they just don't exist. And you can try and come up with other things that do exist, right? You know, you could figure out how many pounds of lumber you've got. You could figure out how many yards of string you're using. You could figure out all these different things, but none of these are relevant to figure out the most value productive arrangement of the factors of production. That is the problem that the socialist has to face. He has to figure out how to figure out the most value productive line of production for any given thing. And without capitalism, I don't see how we can do this.
I guess I just don't understand.
They already do it in fucking China, dude. They do it in fucking China. Yes, they do.
They just do what people vote on doing. They do an infrastructure project that people decide.
And how is that figuring out the most value productive line of production?
Because it's the one that serves the people. It's the one that serves human need, and that's what the basis of the system is, rather than profit. So if people vote that they need a hospital, they will build a hospital in a day. If they vote that they need transit to that hospital, they will build that quickly too.
Should they build it out? But should they build it out of granite bricks or some other type of stone? Maybe should they build it out of bricks or wood? This hospital.
Right, but if the difference is that they make the wrong decision and then the hospital is 2% less efficient in the construction, that only happens once.
No. Who cares? They don't even know how less efficient it is the point. They
Let's
have no way.
Less efficient. You construct the hospital
once.
Who cares? It doesn't matter.
They have no way to figure this out for anything. So they can figure out what people want. Sure, you can figure out what people want. Like, let's even say they've got like Star Trek technology. They can put a chip in everyone's brain, which will tell them exactly what everyone wants. So we can just throw the knowledge problem out completely. They know exactly what everyone wants. The question at hand is, how do they figure out how to produce these things? Because there are innumerable different ways. You might want to produce a hospital, and the cars to get to the hospital, and the roads that they're going to drive on, and the type of rubber that they're going to use to build the tires for those cars. Every single thing. This is iPencil, right? Every single thing that you're interacting with right now, there are innumerable different ways that you could possibly produce that thing. And the socialist simply cannot figure out whether he's producing anything in an efficient way. So he needs to go unmet.
How do they have things? I don't understand. Like,
Because
it's like they exist.
They predate upon capitalism. They predate upon the producer. So you see this very clearly in the USSR. They would try and copy outside prices, try and copy the capitalist prices. That didn't really work out very well for them. And, you know, they'd have all sorts of misallocations. Like, you know, they would go like, okay, we need this many nails, and it was easier to meet the quota for nails if you chose really, really big nails. So they didn't have any little roofing nails. And it was, the quota was in how many yards of cloth you used for clothing. So you couldn't get any small clothing. You'd have really, really baggy clothing.
Why do you need to
all the
talk
time.
about the 20th century examples? The 20th century examples are what people like you always jump to.
We can go away from the specific examples if you want.
China,
if you can give me
China.
If
I
you,
want to talk about China.
If you
today,
okay,
right now.
So let's talk about China.
Yes.
Have you seen on?
They manufacture things.
Let me discuss this
based on a market demand.
Okay, and explain to me why there is that every time I go on the internet and look up China, I see these huge ghost cities, entire cities where nobody's in them because they just completely misallocated all these resources.
That's not an issue anymore. Most of those are filled up, or it was like production for areas that they expected to be populated that maybe they changed some kind of plans and they weren't. But some of them have been demolished, but most of them ended up being filled up. Like that was an issue that people were talking about like 12 years ago. And then 5 years ago, I started to see the debunks of the ghost cities because it was like when real estate started to get really expensive after COVID here in the US. And everybody was like, oh shit, we probably should have done what China did, which was build a whole bunch of housing in advance for expanding populations. And then we wouldn't have these issues, which is why China now has like home ownership rates in like the 95% for most people, and then like the high 65% for like millennials even. And they don't have like the out of control costs of renting or housing like we do here in the West. So,
and so hold on. Can I jump in on that?
No.
And then we got to deal with the roads. And then this guy, he don't even going to respond to anything that I say. And this is crazy, man.
The Chinese government long-term urbanization plans are starting to take effect with rural populations moving in. Chinese urban planners have also learned from the past mistakes, are now implementing better phasing of development, including ensuring that essential services and amenities and job opportunities are in place before alongside residential development.
But they're going to collapse. So
the government has adjusted financial incentives for cities and developers to discourage overbuilding. What you don't see is that there's data now, and we were interconnected. We've got blockchain, we've got AI, we've got all this stuff. We can have the data points to do what we need, which is to make these systems more and more efficient with every iteration. What you do is you're trying to talk about the 20th century when the 21st century has the tools that it needs in order to make socialism work better, right? And not even taking into account how much jobs are going to be lost by automation in the next 10 years, which is slated to be at least 800,000 jobs. You have no plan on how a laissez-faire capitalist system is going to be able to account for that. What you're suggesting is a dystopian society where no one has access to jobs. People in your constituency, the WEF or whoever it is, the people that are pushing capitalist narrative. I don't care. Well, they're capitalists. They're capitalists. That's
actually,
true.
Zulu, what's your opinion on the WF? Are you like a?
I can't finish.
Oh,
yeah, they seem like commies.
I just want. Okay, that's kind of what I expected.
Because they care about the environment. You know, everyone who cares about the environment is a commie.
Yeah,
that's funny. I mean,
I can do better than this on this show for sure.
No, I mean, it's funny because I did not expect to end up playing like the moderator figure here. I expected like Chris was going to moderate between me and Zulu, but like I guess if I just have one ask for the rest of the recording time, it's like if Chris, if you could just like don't insult Zulu. I know like he'll make you angry, but like just keep it like civil and try to like keep the rants to like a couple points that he can address because he wants to do it like a math kind of thing. Like he's like a like a philosophy guy or whatever. And then Zulu, if you could just not do that math thing when he does go on his rants so they don't have to mute you. Like that's all, guys.
But
like,
it's so funny.
It's kind of, I mean, it's all fun. Like I think you're a funny guy, Zulu, but I just don't think that anarcho-capitalism is a serious philosophy, which is why like when I ask where the rubber meets the road, and then you have to like refer back to like 20th century examples of socialism that didn't work out because of war communism methods that like even socialists admit were not efficient and not the way to do things. And now we look to examples like the modern day, which is where they mix socialism. They nationalize larger industries so you don't have like massive amounts of people suffering from lack of availability of healthcare like we do.
This is what I wanted to jump in on. Like,
okay.
So if we don't want to discuss specific examples like the USSR, then we can just the in the general case, you know what we call this? We just call it theory. right? Economic theory. Okay, so then on the theoretical grounds, where we're not talking about any specific examples, because you guys don't want to talk about any specific examples. Okay,
no, I mean, we can talk about some specific examples. Like
only the examples you guys like.
No, I just
talk about whatever you want, buddy. You go for it.
I think it's indicative.
Talk yourself into a big circle.
Why one works, and then you have to respond, like go back to another one that didn't work, as if socialism is not like a constantly evolving process.
I was trying to respond to why I think China isn't actually working. And then this guy, he comes in with like, so I don't think China does work at all. I think they're massively misallocating resources.
By what metric?
Oh, all those military bases.
We just went over ghost cities.
I'm trying to explain it to you.
Debunked.
All these massive aircraft carriers, all these massive military bases going all over the place, the huge dams that they're building, all these massive construction projects.
Wait, how many military bases is China building?
Pick one example.
All over the South China Sea.
Let's get into that, because I was not aware that they were even doing this. I'm a big China fan. I like the PLA. Hold on. How many bases?
Probably way less than the US, don't get me wrong. But there are a decent number of bases coming up the South China Sea.
I guess that's what I mean. Like, how is that less efficient than something like the U.S., which has a fifth of the population and hundreds of times more military bases?
I wasn't saying that it's less efficient than the U.S. I'm saying less efficient than the free market. I think these are misallocations of resources.
Socialist in China, like
in certain areas,
like the military.
Yeah,
and the prison industrial complex, maybe.
Probably, yeah. Because they got a lot of there's a lot of government money going into these sorts of things. So
socialism just means bad. Like if it's profitable.
No, I'm not saying it means bad. I'm not doing a frozen abstraction here. Socialism is when the government does stuff. Is my opinion.
Okay. I mean, that's cool too. It's funny. It's like fitting, but I guess I mean, it makes sense to me. Like the U.S. has the most prison population and the largest military bases because it's a capitalist empire that relies on imperialism. Most Americans and most Westerners don't make the connection between the fact that everything they wear, everything they buy is produced in some kind of sweatshop by some kind of slave labor, the minerals are extracted through some kind of exploitation, and the fact that U.S. imperialism and military defends all of their exploitation, that installs puppet governments and makes sure that there's beneficial trade deals in place for the U.S. to be able to extract all those things in a way that creates a bunch of cheap goods at home. And they don't think that there's any connection. Americans delusionally think that they could cut the military budget, funnel that into healthcare and education at home, and that they would still have a bunch of cheap goods and some kind of first world lifestyle, when in reality they would be totally impoverished if they actually had to trade on equal footing with the third world.
Well, they would have way cheaper goods, relatively, in absolute terms, I should say, if the government just completely got rid of its entire self, if it just disappeared, and we had sound money and all these other lovely things, because the free market, it's just a general rule of economics that the free market is going to more efficiently produce resources than the government. He's getting surveys.
So I'm not trying to laugh at you, because that was legitimately very funny. I could also imagine a situation in which everyone could have cheaper goods if we all just agreed really hard to be nice to each other and be cool, which is about as realistic as having anarcho-capitalism or a free market. But
just agreeing to be nice to each other, again, even if everybody is just completely on the same page, literally every single person becomes a super duper socialist. They are way smarter than anybody who's ever lived, and they are way convinced of socialism, and they really understand it deeply, and they just want to give everything they got to socialism. Even then, you still have the economic calculation problem, right? So you don't know which line of production is going to be most efficient for any given good.
Okay, so I think it might just be that you have a fundamental misunderstanding of how socialism and communist organizations work in practice. People don't get to be socialist leaders or even involved in socialism because they're just good people and they just like it. It's they're people who are motivated to organize and do something in their community that is people serving rather than profit serving. They're the opposite of people who are motivated by entrepreneur ambition or profit seeking. They don't want to exploit other people. They actually want to help people. So they start socialist organizations, and then the people who get to be leaders are forcefully nominated. It's somebody who shows up and continually does the work and proves themselves to be competent, and then other people nominate them. It's not something that they just nominate themselves for. And that's the basis of socialist organizing. That's how socialist governments work. You don't get to be a leader unless you continually prove to the people that you're serving, that you are serving them rather than serving yourself or some other kind of interest like capitalists, oligarchs, and government officials do. So maybe that would be also like there's transparency is the other key. Like people have their actions vetted. They have like all their like what they do is watched, and there is transparency so that they're held accountable. So they don't need to be what do you call it? Like perfectly angelic people or whatever like that. Like it's not a requirement. Like it's a trustless system. So
sure, I'm not saying they necessarily have to be, because I think even if you have that, like I'm just granting the best possible case. Like even if you have that and all the Star Trek technology with where you can read people's brains and you know exactly what everybody wants, even in that case, and you know they are electing the most self-sacrificial people that there are to the top, right? Even if you have all of that, you still can't calculate what the best line of production is for any given good.
False.
Okay, how do you do it?
Computers.
Okay, hold on. How will a computer calculate what the best line of production is?
You're not even telling me what the metric is that you're
How will the
talking
computer
about.
do it?
When things are manufactured, when there's a motivation to manufacture a good, you're not actually telling me
How will the computer do it?
And how it's measured after it's been sold and consumed.
I gave you I said value productive. So how does the computer figure out the most value productive line of production?
What? To make something that somebody wants.
but what is the value to whom? And
Oh yeah,
because
we're lagged.
value as in, like the most.
You're not elaborating.
No, I just want to know if it's like.
Sorry, we lagged out a little
You're
bit.
you're parading around definitions of words.
No, I think it seems like we just have different premises. Okay, so a couple people, Zulu, after we last talked, they said that like what I should do is go after your a prioris, and I don't even know what the fuck those are. So I thought that was really funny, but I'm like wondering if I'm like hinting at it now. Is that like for you, value is whether it generates a profit and is like usable as like a resource that you can generate something, or I mean, I guess like extractive value or monetary value from. Whereas like value for me is if it serves people and benefits human beings. So are those like different things, or are they inextricable for you?
So I think they're related. I don't think money is the same as value. I think money is a fuzzy measure of value, right? Mm-hmm. So what it means for something to be value productive in this sense is that it is bringing about things that people are desiring. It is meeting the desires of people, right? Mm-hmm. And there are certain lines of production which do this better than other ones, right? Because there's a thing called opportunity cost. So if I wanted to use platinum to build all my cars out of, well, platinum is very, very desirable elsewhere other than in making cars. So if I'm using up platinum to make cars, well, then that's meeting fewer ends.
Can we try like a different example? Could we try something like, tell me how you would relate it to this example. Let's say here in the US, you have some people who decide that it's very valuable to buy up a bunch of real estate, whether it's single family homes or buildings or whatever, and then rent them out to people because that generates a lot of return on their investment and it keeps accruing over time. Not only does the property get more valuable, but they just keep generating rent on this thing that sits still and they don't have to put much upkeep into. And then let's say that impoverishes a bunch of people and a bunch of people don't like it, and it creates like a crisis where people start dying because they start choosing between healthy food, health insurance, other things that they could use to live like a meaningful lifestyle, and then they start, I don't know, becoming like sick over time and decaying. Whereas like a country like China decides democratically through their communist organizations that it's more valuable to have real estate not be a commodity and something that's just provided to everybody so that they can go on about being more productive individuals. And then they become more productive on a larger scale as a whole because they don't have impoverished and sick and dying people. So like, how would you relate that? Like,
sure.
I guess.
So just first of all, I think that it is definitely possible to produce too many houses. 2008, they told me this, right? I called them earlier and they said, yep, you can definitely produce too many houses. So, and then the question is, well, how should we, so we can take as given, we know that people want houses. Okay, that's on the demand side. That isn't what the economic calculation problem is about. So the problem I'm getting at is, well, how do you go about producing those houses? What is the most value productive way to produce houses? Do you build them out of wood? Do you build them out of like steel girders? Do you make them out of bricks? You know, all this different sort of stuff. And the claim that
still went back to the steel. I don't get like it always goes there.
It's just examples, right? And the claim that this gentleman was making was that the computer is able to find the most value productive way to produce these, for in this example, houses. And I don't see how it can do this. Right? It doesn't have data
well,
to
let me
control.
answer the question that I was supposed to answer before, which was modern technology allows for the collection and analysis of vast amounts of data and consumer preferences and market conditions. Companies like Amazon, Facebook, and Google have already demonstrated the ability to predict consumer behavior with increasing accuracy. And there's nothing to say that a socialist economy couldn't have the same access to the same sort of technology. Supercomputers and advanced algorithms now can process complex calculations. They're much faster than the 20th century, when the most of your references about socialism come from. Blockchain technology could potentially address the aspect of information and calculations trying to provide decentralized and transparent system for recording economic transactions.
So it's People's Republic of Walmart, basically.
Yeah, it sounds like that, right?
What?
There was a book called People's Republic of Walmart, and their basic premise was that you could start implementing socialism in the US or the West by nationalizing companies like Amazon or Walmart and using the infrastructure that they've already set up and systems they've already set up, like you're describing.
Yeah, that would be essentially a fucking Chinese model, where you
so
have the capitalists are running the show, but the state has the final control and also pumps subsidies into things in order to guide things to a place where we need to go. But at the end of the day, if you ignore the fact that the environment is something that can be tainted, you're just a fucking moron. So
you're still addressing the wrong side of the problem here. You mentioned how they can analyze consumer behavior, they can figure out what people are going to want, all this different sort of stuff. But you know, I don't know if you guys know this, but Walmart doesn't actually own all of the factors of production, right? They have to buy all their factors of production. They buy these things from different people. So they don't have any sort of socialism going on.
But
there.
what did you say was the problem when you have too many houses? I missed that. You said that you kind of breezed by.
I was just saying that you can have too many houses. You can overproduce things, right? You can have malinvestment anywhere. So,
but that's your big worry.
But so
homelessness
you're
overproducing houses. This is what I don't get: is you're really more concerned about somebody building too many houses rather than people that don't have homes. Because underneath the surface of this argument is, I just look at a kid.
Chris, can I show you?
I just look at a kid that wouldn't open the fucking door for an old lady. That's how
no, I mean, hold on.
Young kid who's got his head up his head.
Did they, since Elon Musk bought Twitter, did they let you back on? And also, can you tell everybody what your username was on Twitter when you got banned?
Oh yes, it was fuck poor people.
Yeah.
And then then I made a second account and it was fuck disabled people.
So you have to understand, Chris, this is where he's coming from. Like,
he's got a verbose, robust vocabulary, but he's actually just a grungy fucking piece of shit standing behind his computer.
Why are you so angry? Why are you so angry, man?
Okay, so this is the thing.
Because
Chris
you're
is also
a fucking
vegan. He's a
retard.
very compassionate guy. So, Chris, I also think like
but at the very base of this guy's
if I'm such a retard, why are you losing a debate to me?
I'm not losing a debate.
Well,
You're
you
talking in
are.
circles. You're saying that
so how do you resolve the ECP? I just said that you're addressing the wrong side. You're addressing the consumer side.
I've been gaslit before. You're a fucking moron.
Hold on.
You're a kid.
You're figuring out
your head up your
what
ass.
people want. You aren't figuring out how to produce what people want. I've explained this to you like 5 times by now.
Go drink some Monster Energy drinks. Go have play Magic the Gathering or whatever you fucking hairy fruitcakes do. The reality is you are using word salad. You're using your little word salad so that you can pretend like your philosophy is going to work somewhere. I want you to explain
specifically what part is a word salad.
It's never worked. The only reason it works in your mind is because you're a piece of shit who has no fucking morals.
Okay, I don't. All right, I don't. I'm gonna meet both of you guys for just a second because, like, Liquid Zulu, I want you to come back and kick my ass in a debate every week. I want to do this all the time because I think it's fun. But I also just think that we're just operating on 2 different levels. Like this whole thing, I guess you keep going back to like, did I say it at some point where I was like, maybe you're right in theory, but wrong in practice or whatever? Like, I don't know if that's just a clumsy way of saying it, but like what I'm getting at is like, when I ask you a question, like, when is this going to start playing out in reality where we can see the results of this? And then your only answer is like, well, China's actually doing bad, despite however good we may think they're doing. It's like compared to the capitalist countries, like that's what I'm talking about. Like, I want to know, like, for people who are living under capitalism, when can they start expecting it to work for them as opposed to providing them only things that either advertise false, like false advertising, planned obsolescence, poison in everything that they ingest. Like, there's a lot of things that should be regulated and they're not being regulated by the free market. And then socialism keeps offering alternatives. And then most people's arguments against those are either that it's not real socialism when they're like people on the left, or that it's like, ironically, actually people on the right say that too. They say that China's doing well because of like capitalism. I guess like, that's why it's funny to me. Like, I don't mind if you come and quote unquote beat us in a debate, because in reality, like, I think we'll be able to check in another 2 years and life expectancy in the US will be again on the decline, and it will be
what an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
Sorry. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I'm just confident that the reality is going to keep proving the socialists right and the capitalists wrong. So we can do these debates as many times as you want. I just don't understand how, like, why you think it makes more sense to then keep harping on like
the ECP. It's the ECP. You gotta solve the ECP, everybody. Solve
when we're looking at the reality of these things. Like,
so yes, if we look at the reality of these things, you know, you mentioned all these people who are living under capitalism. Hey, if you can point them out to me, then I'll go ahead and go over there, because I certainly can't see it anywhere on planet Earth. All over the place, you know, where is this free market where I can just do whatever free market business I want? It certainly isn't America, right? It's certainly not China. It's nowhere, right? We are way, way, way poorer than we could have been if we had actual free market capitalism at all.
in theory.
Yes, and the theory implied is true. It's correct theory.
This goes back to what I'm saying. Like, you guys are like the 90s versions of like the Trotskyist kids who are like, well, that wasn't real socialism, and if we can achieve real socialism, it'll really be good, I promise, just trust me. But it's never existed anywhere but in my own imagination. Like,
except I'm not like divorcing my theory from reality. They're divorcing the theory from reality. They are saying that man is insufficient. Reality is insufficient to live up to my theory. That isn't the claim I'm making. Reality is perfectly sufficient, and I'm recognizing it, and I'm recognizing that people are being destroyed by the state. That is a recognition of reality, not a rejection of it. So these are two different sides of the coin here.
So where's that libertarian paradise that exists again?
you want to look at some? We should look at some headlines together. We
see
can all
those.
like give our takes on them. I think that's probably a better way to spend the last like 45 minutes than anything else we were going to do. I don't. I feel like maybe that is the thing. Like, we're getting sort of at the, because I'm an idiot. I don't do the philosophy terms. Like, maybe that's my caveman way of getting at what our a prioris are, which is that I want systems that serve people, and you want systems that serve profit. And I guess you think that the systems that serve people will eventually fail because they're mathematically unsound on some platonic level, and that the capitalist systems will eventually win out, even if we've never seen them in human history.
But to be clear, my claim was never that the capitalist systems will necessarily win out or anything like that. People can be very, very vicious. You know, we might get Immanuel Kant #2 come along and have super socialism come about, and everybody dies.
Tell me about Immanuel Kant and why you don't like him.
So, in any sort of sane philosophy, there are three things that you've got to have at its root. You've got to have existence, consciousness, and I've got the third one. It might be free will. Free will is another good one. I can't remember if that's the actual one that I gave earlier. I have a video on my channel about this. And Immanuel Kant, he represents an attack on everything that you could possibly have there. Existence, well, existence doesn't actually... Causality, I think that was the third one. Existence doesn't actually exist as you picture it. Existence is an unknowable noumenal world that you can't possibly know anything about, right? Mm-hmm. Which, so how he told us about it, I don't know. And then consciousness. Well, what you're perceiving, that's not actually how it is, right? Your consciousness is lying to you this whole time. So you've just got to retreat into your mind. Consciousness is out. Because he attacks it on the grounds that it is what it is, right? Mm. Because your consciousness, because you have specific faculties of perception, therefore you aren't perceiving reality as it really is. Therefore, what would his ideal consciousness be? It would be one which has no particular means of perceiving, one which isn't anything in particular, i.e., one which isn't anything, one which doesn't perceive, one which is not conscious. So his ideal consciousness is a non-consciousness. So consciousness is completely out on this view. Then causality. Well, causality, that's just a dream in your head. Everything is just a dream in your head. You are completely cut off from the outside world. He can't even say about anything in the numeral, there is a thing out there which acts on my consciousness in some way to produce this phenomenal object. Well, okay, let's break that down. There's a thing. Whoops-a-daisies, that's identity. That's out, because identity is one of his categories. It only applies to the subjective numeral. And it acts on my brain. Whoops-a-daisies, it's acting on me. So causality, that's subjective, phenomenal. That's got to be out. He can't say anything about the numeral, and this is why Hegel just threw out the numeral world. He just threw it out, only the phenomenal, and then you've just got pure consciousness. And that's all there is, right? This is why Kant represents the complete destruction of all of philosophy after him.
Who set up those 3 rules that you had to have the conscious? Would you say the numeral? And
I was just going off of Leonard Peikoff's diegetic against Kant. I can't remember the exact ones he gave or whatever, but something like that. There are like some basic premises in any sort of philosophy that you gotta have, and Kant just completely throws everything out.
All right, let's try this out. I guess we'll have to leave our a prioris for another day, and I just like saying that. I think it's funny. But I was gonna watch this on our regular stream before you showed up, Zulu. And if you want to pull up any news articles or things that you want to bring up to share as well, feel free. But let's check this out. This is something I saw earlier from Lady Izdahar. And she said, did you know that nearly 20,000 Americans moved to the Soviet Union in the late 1920s and early 30s? Here's a book that largely contributed to that.
Convinced thousands of Americans to immigrate to the Soviet Union. Imagine, it's 1931. The Great Depression has hit hard, and every 4th American worker is out of a job. Desperation is in the air, but then something incredible happens. A spark of hope from an unexpected place. The Soviet Union. News starts spreading about massive construction projects in the USSR. Projects that need skilled workers. They're not just any projects, they're building blocks of a new society, one that promises a future of equality and opportunity. Inspired by this, many Americans turned to this newly translated book in 1931, New Russia's Primer, The Story of the 5-Year Plan by M. Ilin, which ended up being a bestseller on the nonfiction list for the year of 1931. It paints a beautiful picture of a land where resources aren't hoarded by a few, but rather used to uplift an entire nation. A place where people like them can contribute to something bigger, something meaningful. You see, in the first 8 months of 1931 alone, Amtorg, the Soviet trade agency in New York, received over 100,000 applications from Americans wishing to immigrate to the Soviet Union, ready to leave behind a life of uncertainty in the Great Depression for a chance to help build a new world. Many of these applicants would also be minorities from the United States, hoping for better treatment in that vision as well. It was a small revolution of hope. People weren't just escaping hardship, but running towards a dream, not just a better life for them, but for future generations. The 1930s is filled with this sentiment in the West for what could have been. And it's really cool that a lot of it started with this book right here. Proof that a single book, printed words.
All right, so yeah, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I thought
that was a cool little clip.
I think anybody who's convinced by that sort of thing should read We the Living and, see the sort of reverence that the Soviets had to this concept of abroad. They speak about it almost as if it's like Atlantis, like it's the land that is like just heaven, basically. Abroad, they don't even have to care about if they damage their stockings. Abroad, they wear lipstick on their lips. It's like, whoa, abroad, what a place.
What do you mean? Oh, like in the Soviet Union, they thought everywhere else was a fantasy land because they were so impoverished or something.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know if that's really the case. I've heard a lot of stories about Soviet workers having much more control over their labor and better living conditions than people here in the West have, but they just didn't have creature comforts or what do you call it,
like food
commodities, disposable things, the high-tech stuff that they would see in marketing for
I
the
certainly
West.
agree there wasn't any high-tech stuff available to the Soviet consumer.
Yeah,
unless they're
what you
party
like.
man, of course.
But I also think that that's what goes. It maybe again, it's another a priori. Like I think your philosophy appeals to people who view themselves as entrepreneurs, as owners, as exploiters of other people, whereas mine appeals to people who view themselves as workers and want better conditions for workers like themselves. And I think a lot of people who take on your philosophy are disappointed when they find out they're not the 1 in 1,000 or 10,000 that becomes a successful businessman. Whereas, like, I don't know, it's fine to be a worker. Like, I just don't think it's what's the term? I don't think it's a condemnable thing. I think it's admirable to be a working class person.
I don't think it's condemnable to produce things with your hands or anything like that.
This is from you fuck poor people on Twitter. Sorry.
I think it's condemnable to be a collectivist who doesn't want anything better than having just pure toil for every man, woman, and child. I think that's pretty condemnable. But yeah, if you want to get in there like Hank Rearden at his mills, pumping out some metal and all sorts of stuff like that, perfectly fine. You know, that's admirable.
Oh, okay. Here's another thing. Also, Zulu, if you have any things, so we could like trade off, but I'm going to pull this up here on the screen because somebody sent me this in an email yesterday, and they knew that we were going to have this discussion today, and they they sent me this page on Rational Wiki called the Neo-Reactionary Movement, and they had a couple questions. They were like, "This Liquid Zulu guy, is he actually like an anarcho-capitalist, or is he just like a minimalist government guy?" And they were like, and then they asked me like theoretical questions, or not? They were like, do you think he actually believes this stuff, or do you think he's just one of these neo-reactionary people? And it was the first I've heard of it. So I don't know. Have you ever heard of this? Is this something that you're familiar with? Do you know about Mencius Moldbug or Curtis Yavin? What do you make of them?
I think they're just a bunch of voodoo hoodoo bullshit going on. Like I can probably find like a screenshot I took on Twitter. Let's see here. Like I think they are absolute nonsense mongers. They speak only in philosophies, and they're just an absolute joke of a community.
Yeah. Why do you think they're never going to see any of their stuff realized in material reality in their lifetimes? I
don't even know what they're saying, and I don't think they know what they're saying. I've got to find this fucking picture now. God damn, where would it be?
It's wild because like they do have like titans of industry in their thrall, like these people who are on this neo-reactionary movement. Like they actually seem to be making differences in mass amounts of people's lives, like not even just their own, as far as like whatever projects they're doing and how much they're exploiting other people and influencing culture. So it's wild to say that they're just purely philosophical people.
It's not even that they're purely philosophical or anything, because I don't think that's necessarily derogatory. I think they are just complete and utter mystics. Like, yes, I found it. Okay, here we go. I'll just send the tweet into the private chat. Like, just this is from Fanged Noumena. Like those are actual pages in Fanged Noumena.
Fanged Noumena, what is this? Let's see. Oh my god, this is nonsense. Hold on, let me
look at that.
Much for the integral connection between value storage ever feel. So these are like California.
Crackspan wants to join. Can I send him the link?
I mean, we're only gonna be on for another half an hour, but yeah, sure. I mean, Chris, what do you think? Are you punching out? Like, you seem like you're not. I was gonna like start to wrap it up because I feel like you're not into it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have much I can say. I don't think I could add anything that would be addressed or be fruitful. I think this is, frankly, it's a little below me, but that's okay.
Okay. Maybe let's wrap this one up and let's do another one. And if you want to bring Praxben along so that we can have like even teams and maybe we can prep some more stuff so we can have like a better discussion. Like,
I don't think that's what it is. I think that there's just behind all the rhetoric and everything are people who are just different, biologically different, have different attitudes, have different life experiences that make us believe different things. And having a conversation about it is futile because this guy can't even describe what harm is. He doesn't believe that the environment can be tampered with or tainted in a way that would have long-term consequences. It's just, there's no point. There's no point for me to have a conversation with somebody like this.
Okay,
I
so
can.
I guess my question is like, do we do another half an hour and bring in Prax Ben as well, or do we?
We could do another
Or do we
one,
just
like
wrap it up and do
like
a different session?
like a different day. Like I'm down with that.
Because I'm fine with either. I just like, if Chris, you're just gonna be like, just don't be mad, man. Like it's fine. Like,
Well,
but also I think that's okay.
this is like the worst kind of gaslighting, pretentious, pontificating, and interruption fest that I've ever had to.
I think what you're getting at also is that like it's easy for people who are in like look, so this is what I ran into the last time I talked to Liquid Zulu and Praxben, was that people in my Discord, people who were like leftist and actually marginalized people, got super mad and like emotional at everything that Liquid Zulu was saying, and it didn't affect me that way, and I didn't understand why they were getting so pissed off and they couldn't
It's
handle
not
the
because it's not.
because-
I'm not ego or anything like that. I'm mad because I can see through what this young man is doing. He's using words to his advantage, philosophizing to a degree which confuses you, Mike, and makes it so he doesn't answer questions and evades.
But I don't feel confused. Like,
Well, he about what we are as human and what we are here. He puts a lot of veneer on it to make it seem like no, humans can survive this other fantasy way that when you can't. Like the environment is real.
yeah.
And that's the end of the story. And the China.
I agree, the environment's
is
real and it's a
actually-
bad thing, and we should destroy it. Like,
Yeah, see,
mean,
that's
we're
not
all in
like
agreement here.
That's not like a fucking person that's serious.
But no, I don't think
taken seriously.
I don't know. I mean, look at who do you actually believe that the environment is bad? Like,
yes, so I've got an entire article on my website called the Anti-Environment Manifesto. And
but what's your premise? I guess if you, I mean, even like 30 seconds.
sure, so the basic idea is that whenever humans are out there doing anything, achieving anything, being productive, they are necessarily destroying the environment. What the environment means is non-man. If something is natural, it means it's not produced by man. If you are looking at any great structure, a great skyscraper, let's take, you are looking at something where a man has taken all these materials out of nature, destroyed nature, and put in its place this brilliant spire, this brilliant monument to the beauty of man's mind. And so what the environmentalist really hates is man. He hates man and wants man to die, wants man to be writhing
That's
around
the
in the dirt
stupidest
like some sort of
fucking thing I've
beetle
ever heard.
or
That's so
worm.
stupid.
They
But
hate
you're
humanity.
such a fucking moron.
Okay,
You're
so
such
now,
a fucking moron.
Okay, then I'll send you my article and you go ahead and debunk it.
but now, Liquid Zulu, what would
I
you
don't
say
need
to the
debunk
argument
it.
that?
I don't need to debunk your like misguided,
can't.
jaded fucking opinions about the world you live in. I don't need to go and comb through the ravings of a madman. Okay?
What Liquid Zulu? What would you say to the argument that what environmentalists want is infrastructure that is sustainable and works with the environment rather than exploiting
Yes.
or causing some kind of long-term damage?
So what they mean by...
but hold on, just one more, just the last part of that. And what would you say to the idea that the assumption that human activity has to look like Western architecture and has to be exploitative to the environment is like a white supremacist assumption?
Okay, so what they mean by sustainable is that it's sustaining anything except for humanity. They never consider human needs. They never consider whether humans want to eat food. They never consider whether humans want to be building these things. They consider only sustaining the environment, i.e. the non-human. That's what they want to sustain. And the connection to white supremacy, I think, is fairly laughable. I don't see how that leap is being made.
Oh, good. I was gonna say, just bring Praxben in at this point. Like, what's going on, Praxben? How's it going, man?
Going? Good to be back. How's my audio?
Good to see you again. Good, very good.
I can point to several things in your little anti-environmental manifesto. First of all, it sets up a false choice between human progress and environmental protection.
How's that a false choice?
It's ignoring the possibility of sustainable development.
Okay,
It
hold
portrays
on.
all-
Sustainable
and-
development.
no,
What does sustainable development mean? If not that you're sustaining the environment at the expense of humans. Explain that to me.
Say again?
What does sustainable development mean? If not sustaining the environment at the expense of humans.
At the expense of humans. How so?
Because to whatever degree you're keeping nature preserved, humans are not allowed to touch it and are not allowed to better their lives using it. So it's at the expense of humans.
That's a hell of an assumption.
That's
to me.
a,
Like,
that's
it's not
a
an assumption.
total-
It's
that's
clear.
hyperbole. No,
Okay, well,
that's hyperbole.
let me see if I can
That's
answer.
hyperbole.
Do you think there's any
Believe
way
it or
that
not,
humans can
some
live?
crops, look, crops can be regrown. There
Okay.
are systems in nature that are regenerative. So,
And humans should be in
what the fuck
control
you
of all
talking
these things. Right? It shouldn't be left up to the devices of nature, because nature hates humanity.
okay. I
Okay,
don't
so
know
but-
where that's written, but
I guess
you
is
also
it-
are mischaracterizing environmentalism and painting all environmentalists as anti-human and anti
wanna ask-
which is a really gross oversimplification. You
It's
also
not.
inject Ayn Rand philosophy,
I
which is
demonstrated
pretty much
in the article.
it's not widely accepted in academic circles.
Oh
Pretty much
no!
Ayn Rand is a
Whatever
giant,
will I do? It's not widely accepted.
well,
However
I'm
will I
just letting you
cope?
know that you're
Oh
on
my
the fringe
god!
here.
Oh
that-
no, I'm on the fringe. I
considering-
never realized this. You're the first person to tell me this stuff.
Well,
Did you know that? I've actually never heard these things before.
I was scared.
I'm so
I was young,
distraught.
too.
I guess I'm going to be a communist now.
Can I just?
Like, what do you think
can I
this is
just
going to
interject?
happen?
Can I just possibly
The
ask?
manifesto dismisses climate change and environmental concerns without
It doesn't
addressing the
dismiss
vast
it. It says
body
it's a
of
great thing.
scientific evidence.
Hold on, I just want to ask: is it possible that anyone can conceive of some kind of civilization, maybe something that looks primitive, and that maybe people who are like brought up in like white Western-centric societies would judge as like less developed and primitive, and would like think negatively about it, but that doesn't affect the environment in some kind of what we call externality related way that causes long-term damage or insustainability, or makes it uninhabitable for humans in the long term. I'll unmute you guys now. Sorry.
Yeah, I think primitive means anti-human. It's the same thing. This is the.
But
this
you're
hold on.
just saying those words mean the same
Hold
thing.
on,
when
I'm
they
trying.
don't,
I'm
like-
trying to explain it. Right. This is the fundamental. That man should be returning to the dirt. He shouldn't be using his mind to better his life. He shouldn't be going out here and being productive. That he should just take whatever is given to him. They should live like some fucking lower animal, like a worm or a beetle or something like that. Right? That the glacier, for some reason, has a greater moral claim to the ice that it contains than man does to his own fucking car, on his own fucking property, burning his own fossil fuels. I think that is
agree.
an
Fuck those
anti-human
glaciers. We
perception.
don't need breathable air or a planet that we can live on. I agree. Like your
We can have
philosophy
plenty of
is-
breathable air.
It's all good.
Liquid Zulu is the type of guy that if your dog came over to his yard, he'd probably fucking shoot it.
Praxben, let me hear from Praxben. I haven't heard him talk at all. Like, Praxben,
Well,
you got any
in
rants loaded
regards to primitive societies, a lot of people have this conception that so-called primitive societies were like living in peace with nature. But the fact of the matter is, they were human beings too. They were not animals. They were not monkeys. They went and conquered nature. They mass killed animals. They burned down forests because they realized they had to do these things to survive. And in some manners,
Did they do that as rugged individualists?
What's that?
Did they do it all as rugged individualists or as a collective?
They collectively destroyed the environment, I guess. Is that what you want to hear? I mean, I don't know what kind of
Carry on.
counterpoint
Carry
that
on.
is, but
Carry on.
I mean, in some regards, you can point out that they did things that were unnecessary because some societies had silly beliefs, like they believed that animals would go tell other animals about the humans and that they would avoid them in the future and it would be much harder to hunt. You know, some of these things, it wasn't quite legitimate, so maybe they killed more animals than they otherwise needed to. But the thing is, as mankind goes forward, as we learn more things, as science advances, we learn how to do things more efficiently. But regardless, if we're doing things more efficiently, we still need to conquer nature. And if we're going to conquer nature efficiently, it has to be through a capitalist
Define
system.
conquer nature. Define conquer nature.
I would say conquering nature is using our status as the top beings, as the most intelligent beings, and like the people who can create tools and stuff like that, and going out there the way we want it to be, molding things to the way we need it to be.
Are you familiar with Rapa Nui, Easter Island? These indigenous people that lived on this island where they cut down all the trees. Have you heard about this?
Here and there, I've never really read about that.
What I'm wondering is, at what point do you stop and say, oh, if we cut down this last tree, then none of the trees will come back. We won't have any wood. We won't have.
I mean,
the
if they weren't
supplies we need."
primitives, then
And the
they'd
whole
know to plant more
idea of-
trees. You know.
What?
The problem there is that they're just primitives, right? They don't realize that they should
Yeah,
plant more trees.
Well, I'm asking in your situation, how would you negate that, right?
By
Well, I
planting
mean,
more
we can
trees.
just Yeah, plant more trees. And if you want to compare capitalist and social,
so you're saying it? No, but you're saying at some point that you would actually.
Hold on.
You would. No, I'm just.
Brent.
I want to make sure that we're.
No, but hold on. I want to hear Praxman. I want to hear Praxman.
No, I don't want to hear it. No. I want to know. At what point would you say, "Oh, we better not cut down this last tree because we haven't planted enough trees"? Trees grow slowly. You have to actually plan in advance, and you'd have to at some point say, "Oh, we better slow
primitives
down.
don't know how to do this."
Left.
That's what we do. That's literally what we do. We have more trees in America today than we had in 1850. We are planting trees. We were planting more trees in the 1950s than the Soviet Union was. We were planting more trees in the 1980s than the Soviet Union was. It was the socialist mindset that led people to not go out and do things like planting more trees. They were the people who didn't have this conceptualization of private property that we actually need to preserve, like individuals need to preserve their own property. They just went out there and like, oh, this is the collective property, we take it and use it. It's always been these socialist societies consistently. If you make any one-to-one comparison, they've always been more damaging to the environment, and it was not in the case.
What metric? What? I don't get. I haven't found this. There's more trees since 1850? That's wrong. That's false.
No, it's not. It's fairly easy to find this information if you want.
I'm looking at it. It's not. There's been significant deforestation since 1850. Yeah.
Oh, really? Where are you hearing that from? Are you like looking at a graph of like virgin forests?
The FAO.
Are you looking at a graph of virgin forests?
UN Food and Agriculture Organization.
Did you answer the question? It's a yes or no question.
Net forest losses in recent decades.
Net forest losses. Yeah, I don't believe you.
Oh, okay. So it's just a bad belief then. All right, that's fine.
No, I think you're completely wrong. I think what
Praxman wants to do is say that socialist countries are bad for the environment because he's going to reference the Soviet Union, but he's not going to reference modern day China because
socialists are bad for the environment too. Socialists are bad for the environment too.
I mean, modern day China recognizes that they have to conquer nature as well. They're building record amounts of coal plants. They're still building coal plants, right? They're not going anywhere towards what you hippies want. This environmentally friendly
versus communism. The simplest way to explain capitalism. You're spreading lies on the internet. Japan and South Korea have way higher carbon emissions per person than China. You never hear anyone calling them out. Meanwhile, the United States, Canada, and Australia emit almost 3 times as much per person than China. That's because China actually ranks 14th in carbon emissions per person, which is insane when you consider the amount of infrastructure and cities they're building and all the production that they do for the rest of the world. From the phone in your hand to the bullshit in my backdrop, everything that you buy online is produced in China, and that results in carbon emissions for them. That's why China has the highest carbon emissions out of any single country, but you're conveniently leaving out the fact that China has a population 4 times the size of the United States. If we had 4 United States polluting as much as the current United States is, that'd be a wrap. This world would be cooked. Also, climate change would be the least of our problems if we had 4 United States. The reason why China's carbon emissions are actually so low is because they produce 1/3 of all renewable energy in the world. 17% of the population doing 80% of all solar energy in the world. They're responsible for the majority of new nuclear energy construction. They built 68% of the entire world's high-speed rail network in just 15 years. If you had their massive population flying around as much as Americans fly around, we'd be cooked. And when they drive around, it's in electric vehicles. They produce and purchase 5 times more electric vehicles than the second place country, which is the United States. We're currently in a second Cold War, and it's kind of bad timing with the whole climate apocalypse thing. But during the first Cold War, we had the space race where the United States and the Soviet Union were competing to demonstrate whether capitalism or socialism was better by seeing who could do the most fun space stuff first. Now we should be having a green energy race to see whether the United States or China's economic model is better. But instead, the United States is just lying, and you guys are helping them. As Americans, we need to get real, because the only thing that can happen when we're spreading negative information about China is our government might start another war. Taiwan might get completely eviscerated. Who does that serve? Why do you guys want that? Meanwhile, if we talk about the good things that China's actually accomplishing, real facts, not just propaganda, then our government gets jealous and has to compete, and we save the world from climate apocalypse.
So yeah, That's just a video I like from Dante the Hater. He's like one of my favorite people online who does a lot of like deep dives and then layman's terms debunking of common propaganda about existing socialist countries or what capitalists say about the capabilities of their system as opposed to what is actually happening in reality.
I mean, what he said was a perfect example of how we're correct. I mean, yes, look at Japan and South Korea. They have more carbon emissions per capita than China. They also have significantly better quality of life. They're significantly richer because they were willing to go and do that. Now, in regards to China, no, they are not becoming environmentally friendly hippies. Yes, they have built quite a bit of renewable energy infrastructure. But I mean, if you compare
they're the leader in the world. They're the leader in the fucking world.
No, they're not. If you compare the efficiency of their renewable energy to like in wind power, take wind power. Take wind power, bro. You're so triggered. You're so triggered because I'm correct. I'm smarter than you. I'm more handsome. I'm stronger than you. I'm better than you in every single way. You're inferior to me.
Oh my
God. You're a liberal. You're a soy boy. Physiognomy check. Negative canthal tilt. Anyways, I will continue. So take wind power and for America and China, for example. China has significant.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
That's such a pathetic person. Why is he
Significantly
playing
less
this clip?
turbines than America, but America's capacity, their actual output of wind energy is significantly higher than China. So what people do is they cherry pick data points because they can't actually deal with reality.
Yeah,
I did not cherry pick any data points.
You didn't cite anything just now. Deforestation rate, 27,000 trees cut down each day for toilet paper alone, which translates to 9.8 million trees. The current extinction rate is about 1,000 times the natural rate.
I love toilet paper.
30 to 50% of all species on Earth could disappear. Plastic pollution in oceans, roughly 14 million tons of plastic make their way into the oceans every year. Biodiversity loss.
14 million tons. You know how fucking big the ocean is, bro.
Populations. Fish, birds, reptiles, amphibians have experienced an average decline of 68% between 1970 and 2016. In 2022, global carbon emissions from fossil fuels.
Can we just real quick pull up the graph that I put into the private chat?
8 billion metric tons of 2023 emissions expected to increase by 3%. 2022 global carbon emissions. You have international organizations on mitigation estimates that up to 200 million people could be displaced by climate change by 2050. Half of the world's coral reef has died in the last 30 years, and 2/3 been damaged by coral bleaching. Earth overshoot, marking when we've used up more resources than the planet can renew in 1 year, becomes earlier each year. We currently use 1.7 times the Earth's capacity. Plastic waste, 91% of all plastic.
How many things are you going to list, bro?
Not recycled. 78%
I get
of
that you can read a book. I understand this.
On plastics, plastic garbage.
Well done. You can read a book.
The global population.
Are you going to make an argument here?
Leading to increased demand for resources. For example, the extraction of materials from the Earth has
not one evaluation in this whole thing.
High-income countries consume resources at unsustainable rates. The material footprint per capita in high-income countries is 60% higher than the upper middle class. That's what he just said in the video. Many industries and consumption patterns are not optimized for resource efficiency. For instance, planned obsolescence in consumer goods leads to unnecessary waste and resource depletion. Our reliance on non-renewable fossil fuels continues to deplete these finite resources. Fossil fuels has increased 45% since 1970. We've lost 70% of the wildlife since 1970. Many resources are being extracted faster than they can be replenished. 34% of fish populations are overfished globally. The global use of materials is expected to grow by 60% in the next 25 years. I can go on and on, but these are just facts. You guys aren't interested in these.
Yeah, but Chris, have you considered that Praxben has that jawline and he's super handsome? Did you think about that?
I'd fuck him. I'd drape him over a chair. I'd fuck him.
Did you think about that?
No, I kind of zoned out on all that. That's I wish.
Facts are hard. Facts are hard. It starts going
they can't just fire these things off the top of their heads. They have to go read random blogs and
Chris,
shit.
real quick.
We've lost 100% of our forests.
Real quick, what is your response to the Hume's guillotine is art gap? Because if you want to make an evaluation here, based on those facts, I need to get that from you. Like, how do you deal with it?
How's your Pollock says what index?
How do you deal with Hume's guillotine, the supposed Azot cap? I know how I deal with it. I'm pretty sure I know how Prax Ben deals with it. How do you deal with it?
You bring up some shit from a book you read and think you can stump me because I don't
Very ironic that you accuse me of bringing up some shit from a book you read. Mister, let's just look down all the time.
How do you account for
and
in
be
your style the Polak
lane
says
by
what
lane by lane.
Wait, hold on
How
a
do you
second. Why, guys? Like, can we just like actually hash out some points here? Like, I feel like I don't know. There's just no need to get so angry. I'll unmute you guys. Just chill. It's fine. So I want to look at this energy rich country. Like, I wouldn't say that you need to have a low energy rich country. Like, I wouldn't confuse socialism with primitivism or socialism with poverty. That's something that like neocons and left cons tend to do. Like, people who are too socialist for the socialists, people who are so socialist that they don't think any existing socialist country is actually socialist, despite their communist parties, despite their nationalization of resources, despite like what they do for their working class people, despite the organizations of their societies themselves. Neocons who then say things like, oh, well, China was able to do all that stuff because of Deng Xiaoping back in like 87, even though he's been dead for a long time and out of power for even longer. It's like, it doesn't hold up to reality.
Right.
So
this,
is that
specifically this graph
here?
was as a rejoinder to the environmentalist point that we just gotta leave well enough alone. We just gotta leave nature alone. Well, if you leave nature alone, you're not producing energy. If you're not producing energy, you're not rich.
And comparing socialist and capitalist countries, these socialist countries actually use less electricity and stuff like that, yet they emit more carbon. They damage the environment more, and they do it for what? For nothing. For nothing. They don't have better quality of life.
How are you squaring
damaging the environment?
They just don't know how to do it.
Wait.
How
are you squaring
damaging the environment?
How are you squaring this idea that these socialist countries emit more despite using less energy with that video I just played from Dante, who said that China, despite having like 5 times
I already pointed out.
less?
I mean, I put a little graph in the chat if you want to pull that up, comparing like the wind electricity, for example. So they have more turbines, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to emit more, building more turbines, yet the turbines have less capacity than the United States, right? So they do things like that. They do irrational, inefficient things because it looks good for the government, rather than thinking about how can we actually do this correctly, right? Rather than having private businesses do it. The government invests in all these projects because it makes them look good, whether it be for the Chinese citizens or for the outside world, and they don't actually put any sort of rationality into it.
So where's the...
They don't do it without any...
But I want to know,
like, compare the air quality of North Korea with South Korea.
The motivations of fucking why they're doing. Oh, they're just doing it to look good. No, they're not. They're doing it to make a society. China's growth is more rapid when it comes to this. By this graph, both countries show significant growth in installed wind capacity. China's growth is more rapid, surpassing the U.S. By 2015, China's installed.
So you might say that it looks better.
By 2015, China's installed capacity is nearly double that of the U.S. Both countries have shown an increase in electricity.
So when you look at the graph, the China one looks better.
Generates more electricity from wind than China, despite having lower installed capacity in later years. The gap between installed capacity and electrician generation is much larger for China than the U.S. The U.S. appears to be more efficient in converting installed capacity due to actual electricity generation, but China's large installed capacity...
This guy only knows how to fucking read.
Like, not yet
translates proportionally
to electricity
He's
generation.
just asking
This
GPT everything
lower
here.
efficiency. But still, on the whole, the equipment that they use in the United States, a lot of it comes from China to do it. So,
so what
China's growth in both metrics is more aggressive.
Thank you for that argument, ChatGPT.
Yeah, honestly, every time you're reading shit, I just zone out. Like, I don't care about like debating.
That's not an argument.
You're Googling.
That's not an argument though. Like, if he's finding facts,
if I bring up facts, regardless,
if I want to go Google shit,
if I bring up facts. Yeah, and you probably should more often. Here's what you should do: when somebody gives you facts, you should address the facts instead of attacking and dismissing the source.
You didn't even say what you were reading.
And,
I was reading
and more fundamentally, how are you moving from these facts to values, right? I know how I do it. I'm pretty sure I know how Prax Ben does it, right? How do you establish an ethic here?
You guys...
Oh, the ethic thing. Yeah, this is
ethics. Okay. Your ethics are lower than everyone else. That's what.
How do you establish an ethic?
If you set an extremely low bar for what.
How do you establish an ethic?
All right, hold on 1 second. So this is from the IEA. This is I think a somewhat recent report. I just found it today. Renewable electricity capacity additions reached an estimated 507 gigawatts in 2023. The whole point of this is that they are saying that over the next 5 years, China is going to be producing 30% of the renewable energy. What is it? In the entire world, despite having less capacity. It was what was the headline from it? Like the teaser headline. I don't know. It's basically China is going to produce more renewable energy than all of the other countries combined over the next 5 years, because nobody else is even investing into that because it's not profitable. So I guess I want to see how that's how that squares with this private businesses decide what is the best and most efficient use of these resources as opposed to these governments.
But what's this? Nobody else is investing in it because it's not profitable. I mean, you do have to deal with things like subsidies and stuff like that. But I mean, in many cases, private companies are trying to build nuclear reactors and they can't. There's entire states in America, the state governments are saying, no, you can't build this new reactor. Right. So what's this? Oh, it's not profitable. No, it's not because it's not profitable. I mean, first of all, it's still based that we use coal. Coal's based. OK, China recognizes coal is based. That's why they're still building new coal plants. But regardless, I mean, we would have more things like reactors if we could actually build them. Plenty of private companies want to build them. Plenty of people want to invest in it.
All right. Well, we got 5 minutes left, so I want to just be generous. Let me give Praxben and Liquid Zulu 2.5 minutes each to say whatever the hell they want. It's as far as their last words. If we meet up again soon or in another 2 years or whatever it is, do you guys think that life expectancy will continue to decline in the West and continue to go up in places like China and other socialist countries? Do you think that other social measures will continue to decline even if GDP looks better in the West, while purchasing power parity, what people can actually purchase with their goods as opposed to how rich the rich people are, goes up in the socialist countries? Basically what I'm getting at is do you think the next time we meet or the next time we talk or whatever, even if it's a distant future or soon, that capitalist countries will start to see better conditions for working class people and socialist countries will be worse off, or vice versa, which is the trends that I've been seeing since the last time I talked to you guys?
Sure, I can jump in there. If we had a capitalist country, then everything would be way better in 2 years. But I know for sure in 2 years, Chris still won't be able to tell me how he bridges Hume's post-guillotine. He won't even know that there is a potential argument that there isn't such a guillotine. He won't know anything of this sorts because he doesn't know how to read anything, which isn't just ChatGPT telling him this stuff. He doesn't.
I'm muting myself.
I know you don't know about
Chris has not read. Chris has not read any metaphysics. He's not read any epistemology. He doesn't know any of these things. He's a very stupid person, and all he can do is relay what ChatGPT tells him. He trained a custom GPT model, maybe at best, on some socialist talking points, and that's who I'm debating right now. And he can't do anything else. All he can do is say, but what about the roads? But what about this? But what about that? And ChatGPT told me this thing today. Did you know that, Liquid Zulu? And I know for sure that will still be the case in 2 years.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
I agree, but directed at a different person.
Loud noises!
That's really cool. That is so cool.
Sorry, you guys.
You! Fuck you! And fuck you!
You guys. That's
pretty much my sentence. You guys are retards, and you need to deal a more diverse education on.
Do I get my closing statement as well?
I mean, please.
I actually came up here because I wanted to talk more about history of China, but that didn't really come up so much. But
history of China?
Just look at the entire history of China, and that demonstrates, you guys kept bringing up China as if it debunked Zulu when he's talking about the ECP, but you look at the entire history of China since the CCP took over, and it's just absolute proof that we're correct. I mean, Mao takes over, he starts, look, oopsie, famine, 40 million people died, oopsie doopsie. Right, Mao dies. Before he died in the 1950s, he tasked a bunch of statisticians to do these studies looking at the quality of life, several different socioeconomic indicators. And he's like, oh, is the quality of life of the Chinese people better today than it was before I took over? All the statisticians said no, it wasn't. So what did he do? He hid the studies. They weren't found until decades and decades later, right? Life sucked. People were impoverished. He was destroying people's homes. Not great. They killed all the landlords, and what happened? Rent quadrupled. All right, we have the data for this. We have all the historical evidence. You guys just ignore it. You guys don't read about the countries that you love so much, right? Then Mao dies. Best thing to ever happen to China. Deng Xiaoping took over, and yeah, you're right. The neoconservatives are not correct that Deng Xiaoping fixed China. It was not the state that fixed China. It was the people rebelling against.
天上太阳红呀红彤彤哎，心中的太阳是毛泽东哎，他领导我们的解放哎，做主人。
Rebelling against the Communist Party. It was the farmers who were saying, we're not going to listen to you under threat of death. We are going to be entrepreneurs. We are going to have private property. And the government had to comply, even though most of the deputies in the Chinese Communist Party said, no, we don't want reforms. A lot of people have this misconception that in 1978, they had all these meetings about reforms. Didn't happen. They actually had to comply with the people, with the entrepreneurs, because they realized the entrepreneurs were doing everything correctly and actually feeding people, right? Then China, which had 100% of the prices of capital goods, that's what Zulu was talking about, the economic calculation problem. It has a lot to do with the prices on capital goods. 100% of them were determined by the state in 1978. By 2004, it was 12.5%. And what did you see? 90% poverty rate to 20% poverty rate. China proves everything Zulu said correctly. So
they were already, before Deng Xiaoping came in, they were already.
Can we play clips during his speech as well?
Shut the fuck up.
How about you shut the fuck up, cunt?
Fuck you, you furry little shit.
Wait, can I do like a quick
before Deng Xiaoping? No, shut the fuck up.
No, you didn't listen to us. You didn't let us speak. So why the fuck should I let you speak? Why the fuck should I let you speak? Explain that to me.
Hold on.
So Deng Xiaoping actually increased.
All right. See ya.